Now, I don't know about you, but I seem to be getting more and more petitions drip-fed to me on my social media news feeds, on my email inbox, even in the post. All these tens, hundreds, thousands, millions of petitions flowing towards me. But to tell the truth, I don't really read any of them. Something happens. My eyes glaze over. My mind switches off. I just keep scrolling. I know. It's terrible, but surely my signature, my single signature, doesn't really matter. Lots of people are going to sign it, even if I don't. And surely no one has time to read every single one. But there was one petition recently that I did read. Not sure why. My eyes didn't glaze over. My brain didn't shut off. I read the whole thing from start to finish. The petition was about a tree. It's a tree in London, a mulberry tree. I have never seen this tree. I've never even really been to the area of London where the tree lives. But for some reason, something about this petition was engrossing. I was obsessed with this petition. The petition was titled something like, "Save Our Mulberry Tree," or thereabouts. What was happening was, developers were wanting to develop on the site where the mulberry tree lives. Anyone want to guess what they were developing it into? Apartments. This is London we're talking about. The tree was in their way, so they wanted to get rid of it. The petition was asking us to come together in support of saving the tree. But why? Why should I care? Why save a tree? One of the reasons that they gave for saving this tree was that it provides links to generations and communities from the past. And that reminded me of a tree much closer to home, a mulberry tree that used to be in this school. So in 1923, on the 350th anniversary of this school, they celebrated. So they had a church service in Barnet Church down the road. They had not one, but 2 concerts. They even had a dance. Imagine that now. Then right at the end of the day, everyone who was present gathered round the mulberry tree in the playground, right in the middle, and they sang the school song, they sang Auld Lang Syne, and they sang the national anthem. And then they gave 3 cheers for the Queen. Or for the school, I think it would have been at that point. It shows that the mulberry tree in this school was so central to the anniversary celebrations. And that tree and the petition tree both probably date back to around the reign of King James I. So James wanted to set up a silk trade in England. And silkworms are attracted to mulberry trees. So James I, in 1607 and 1608, he put out a decree that thousands and thousands of mulberry trees should be planted all across the land. This means that mulberry trees now provide links back to people hundreds and hundreds of years ago. But does that mean we should save them? Does that mean we have to save them? Well, look around you, to the world around you. How many of the buildings from King James I's reign are still standing? If you go down Wood Street 10 minutes to the old school site, how many of the old school buildings are still there? The answer is 1. We don't save all old things just because they are old. So this isn't a totally convincing argument for saving this tree. Right, so let's try a different angle. Maybe we call it the environmental angle. We know trees that exist out there in the world take in CO2, carbon dioxide, and they give out oxygen. And so they're really important to the healthy functioning of our planet. You don't save a tree, you're going to increase the CO2, reduce the oxygen. That's bad. But the developers, if they got planning permission, promised that they would plant trees, lots and lots of trees. You want your apartment to be attractive to potential buyers, so you need some greenery around it. Given the environmental angle, surely lots of trees is better than one tree. Okay, it would take a little while for those young trees to start taking in as much CO2 and giving out as much oxygen as the older mulberry tree. But that assumes that the mulberry tree is going to survive for a decent chunk of time, which is not a given. A recent report said that that mulberry tree, in that position, in its current state, would not last more than 10 years. It'd be dead within a decade. And it's not just scaremongering. Mulberry trees are really, really hard to keep alive. The old mulberry tree in the school site, gone. The cuttings that we took to try and grow new trees, all of those new trees, dead as well. In this context, saving one tree seems like less of a good idea, and planting lots of trees seems like a good idea. And that's what a bunch of people in Scotland thought. Up there, in an area of peatland called the Flow Country, a bunch of people thought, let's plant some trees. The British government agreed, planting trees is a good idea. So what the British government did is they gave these people tax incentives for planting the trees. And plant trees they did, lots and lots of trees. Mainly pine and spruce trees. But it turned out not to be such a good idea that they'd all hoped. These peatlands, they're home to lots of ground-nesting birds. If you put up trees, the predators of the birds, animals like red foxes, like hooded crows, and like pine martens, they've suddenly got more places to hide. They start to do very well. The ground-nesting birds start to do not so well. But maybe you're a fox person, and you think this is quite a good thing. Well, it would be good for the fox for a while. But then, eventually, the ground-nesting birds would get hunted out, and the foxes would lose a key food source. Not such a good place for the foxes then. But say this is not very convincing to you. Say you hate all animals. The only animal that you care about is humans. Well, there's another reason why planting lots of trees in peatland is not the best idea. So peatlands are what we call natural carbon sinks, which means they absorb much more carbon than they give out. A square meter of peatland soil actually absorbs more carbon than a square meter of forest soil. So what the British government had done, and what these people in Scotland had done, is they'd misunderstood trees. They thought more trees is a good thing. In reality, nature's a little bit more complicated than that. And I want to tell you one more story about misunderstanding trees and misunderstanding nature. I read it in a very good book called Underland by Robert Macfarlane. Picture a forest. You might want to close your eyes. This time we're not in Scotland, we're in Canada, in an area called British Columbia. In this forest, you have foresters. They're planting lots and lots of fir trees. The problem for the foresters is that in between the fir trees, interspersed between them, are birch trees. And the foresters don't want birch trees, they want fir trees. For them, the fir is the crop, and the birch is a weed. Just like pulling up plants in your back garden, weeding. Now, the reason that we weed, the sort of conventional wisdom behind weeding, is that there are only limited number of resources. So in the soil, there's only a certain amount of nutrients. In the soil, there's only a certain amount of water. There's only a certain amount of light. And as more plants grow, there's more and more shade blocking out that light to other plants. So the idea is, pull out the plants you don't want and give more resources to the plants you do want. And that's what they expected to happen in Canada when they pulled out the birches. They expected the fir trees to grow more strongly and more quickly. But is that what happened? No. It wouldn't be a very good story if that is what happened, would it? What happened was the fir trees started to suffer and die out. How could this be? What was happening? The answer to the question comes from a woman called Dr. Suzanne Simard. She's a forest ecologist. She's actually got a really good TED Talk, which you should go away and watch. Excellent. She discovered underneath the soil underneath the ground, right in the soil. Connections from one tree's roots to fungus, and then from that fungus to lots of other tree roots. Again and again and again, this massive network of connections between trees and plants in the forest, tied up with fungus. And through that network, they shared nutrients. Does anyone want to know what she called that network? It's a really good name. She called it the Wood Wide Web. Reminds me a bit of that tree in Avatar, the film, the Tree of Souls, where it's connected to all of the living ecosystem on the planet Pandora. And actually, Simard is an advisor on the new Avatar sequels that they're producing at the moment. But anyway, off Pandora, back to Earth, back to Canada, back to that Wood Wide Web in British Columbia. What was happening was the birch trees were giving nutrients to the fir trees. So the fir trees were getting a net gain of nutrients from the birches. So when you pull out the birches, counterintuitively, the firs suffer too. Now, what's all this got to do with a mulberry tree in London and with that question that I started with, why save a tree? Well, what these examples show, what the Wood Wide Web shows, what the peatlands show, is that whenever we think we understand nature, it just wriggles away a little. Modern science can often make us feel like we're masters of the world around us, but in science, there are never any final answers. So it's the process that's important. In that process of striving for truth, a truth that always seems just out of reach, we get new and different ways of understanding the world, and hopefully better ways of understanding the world. So I'm not necessarily saying we have to save that mulberry tree or any other tree. I'm just saying that whenever we find a reason or an excuse not to save a tree, often it doesn't quite turn out the way that we thought it would. So it might possibly be simpler just to save that tree. Thank you.